Hey everyone, welcome to another Modern Deck Tech. Today, Temur Delirious Delver. You know I'm very creative with my deck names. This is not to be confused with my Temur Traverse Delver list, which I'll be revisiting in a couple of weeks. This is a completely new list, I guess, at least a new list that I've ever presented on this channel, or even tried in general. And the main change being a recent reprint, well, not a reprint, a new print in Modern Horizons 2. So yeah, I've been really looking forward to playing with Dragon's Rage Channeler in Temur Delver, or in Modern in general. This card is insane, so we're going to dive right into it. But before we do, as usual, 15-second plug of my Patreon. Link is in the description of this video. Patreon rewards, that's the main goal of my Patreon. It's to take in money, buy sealed product, open up on the channel, and then give back all the rares and mythics to the patrons. And based on the video that I post on my Patreon, that's about 5 minutes long, you have pretty good odds of breaking even or even making more at the end of every year based on Patreon rewards that you're going to get. So check that out. All information is there on Patreon. All right, the core. Temur Delirious Delver. So I've done so many of these deck techs now, and Delver players know. Delver Secrets and Tarmogoyf are mainstays of the archetype. They're always going to be there. They're always going to be 4-ofs. I don't really see playing less than 4 every time I build a Temur Delver list, or just a Delver list in general that has blue and green in it. Dragon's Rage Channeler, though, is this card. I'm not sure. It's definitely not broken. That's for sure, and I'm kind of happy about that because I want to play with it in the long run. This card is really, really good, and the experience I've had with it so far is making me question whether Delver of Secrets has been supplanted. Now, I say this with a heavy heart, first of all, because, my name is Delver of Brews, and I obviously love Delver of Secrets here. And I think Delver of Secrets is here to stay, for sure. But Dragon's Rage Channeler does a really, really good Delver of Secrets impression. It becomes a 3/3 once you have Delirium. It has to attack every turn, if it can, which almost always will. This is a downside, okay? Sometimes you don't want to attack with your Delver of Secrets. Sometimes you just need it to be a blocker. And the ability to choose when to attack with Delver is kind of important. Whereas with Dragon's Rage Channeler, you're attacking in every turn, which means you can't keep it back as a blocker, which means if your opponent has a much larger or even an equivalent sized flying creature, they almost will have no issues doing a trade or just jump blocking and surviving it, and your Dragon's Rage Channeler dying. So Dragon's Rage Channeler definitely has its downsides, and I think those are pretty good limiting downsides. I think if it didn't have that forced attack ability, it probably actually would be closer to being pushed a bit too far. What I really like, the positives. So first of all, 3/3 is better than 3/2. Second of all, you don't have to necessarily rely on revealing an instant or sorcerer on top of your library. And as someone who's flipped trillions of Delvers in his lifetime, I can tell you, even when you play with 30 instants and sorceries in your deck, sometimes Delver just refuses to flip. So that's just the case with Dragon Rage Channeler. You just need to fill your graveyard with 4 card types, which this deck you'll see does. Its Surveil 1 ability is so good. It is such a positive to this card. I don't know what else to say. The ability to filter off the top of your library every time you cast a non-creature spell. Non-creature, this is not just instant and sorcery. This means anything that's not a creature spell. Is I have such few words I use. Fantastic. It is fantastic. You don't want to draw any more lands? Well, next time you cast your next non-creature spell, look at the top card. If it's a Scalding Tarn or any kind of land, put it into your graveyard. You don't want it? Perfect. That's one less dead draw you need to do mid to late game, and even early game. Sometimes you have a perfectly good mana base, in your opening hand. You don't need necessarily to draw more lands right now. So you play Dragon's Rage turn 1, Serum turn 2, and before Serum even resolves, you get to look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it into your graveyard. You probably won't need it at that point. It's just fantastic. And you know what? If you're on one land and you're desperately searching for a land, you need that second land drop. Well, if the top card is not a land and you don't absolutely need it, put it into the graveyard. It'll probably help feed Delirium, and you have a better chance of getting to your land that you need. So Dragon's Rage Channeler, with that surveillability, I'm still trying to process how much I would be valuing this card if it had everything else except Surveil. If it was just a 1/1, if once you have Delirium it's a 3/3 flyer that it has to attack each turn, I definitely don't think I would be valuing it as high as I value it now. This Surveil ability is really powerful. It's definitely a game changer, I suppose, for tempo players. Again, tempo decks are difficult to pilot, mostly because your draws have to be good almost always. And Dragon's Rage Channeler really does a good job in helping you make sure that your draws are as good as they can be. So this card is just fantastic. I have a Delver-less deck that I'll be featuring soon where there's no Delver of Secrets, and Delver of Secrets is replaced with Dragon's Rage Channeler. So stay tuned for that. This card's been fantastic. You definitely need to play with it if you haven't already. Alright, I think I've said enough about the creatures, or at least about the core. There are no other creatures, there's just those 12. We're keeping it short because, hey, this is a Temur Delirious Delver, we need to turn on Delirium. No, I'm not playing Traverse in this list. I found Traverse to fit better in a slightly different list, and you will see that list come up soon. I don't feel like I wanted to have Traverse in this initial Temur Delirious Delver list. It's just, I tried to make it work, but I prefer the angle that this current list is taking, just a hyper aggressive but yet tempo oriented list. Let's take a look at the cantrips. Expressive Iteration, I'm playing 2 of here. Not playing more, there's really not a lot of space because this you'll see in the removal section how much removal we're running. So 2 Expressive Iteration I think is perfectly fine to complement, to round out this deck. Serum Visions as well, 4 of course. I'm really liking Abundant Harvest. I'm not moving away from Abundant Harvest right now. If I can play 4 of, I will. It is, you're going to have to get used to the interactions of Abundant Harvest and Dragon's Rage Channel or DRC and its Surveil ability. Just keep that in mind. It might be a bit confusing for you. Like if you're looking for a land, just be careful what you filter off the top. You might misclick sometimes, at least on MTGO, and get rid of a card that you didn't want to necessarily get rid of. It's also going to make your decisions a bit harder because, and this is just more player thing, it's not necessarily the cards, but you know, let's say you want to play Abundant Harvest, you want a non-land card to be drawn, and then you have the Surveil ability that triggers, and then you see a non-land card, but then you're not really sure if this is the non-land card you want or if it was something else. It's just something you're going to have to get used to. I don't know how else to explain that. I mean, you'll know once you play with it what I'm talking about. But again, this is not necessarily a knock on any of the cards or the abilities. It's just more of a play style. But Abundant Harvest, I'm really enjoying it. In the Traverse list, you'll see I'm playing less because Traverse the Elven Wall does a pretty good job of doing what Abundant Harvest does. But yeah, here I'm playing 4 of. I'm playing also 3 Mishra's Baubles. I was playing 4 and playing 1 less land, so I went down to 16 lands and I was playing 4 Mishra's Baubles. I didn't like it. I did not like it. I think 17 lands are perfectly fine. With Surveil ability of DRC, you can, get rid of the extra lands when you don't need them anyway. Abundant Harvest allows you to skip through land clumps if you, don't need any more lands. Plus, you have Mishra's Baubles, Serum Visions, Expressive Iteration. So with all these cards, I think 17 lands is still safe. You don't want to be too short on lands. You don't want to get screwed in opening hands. And you don't want to necessarily have to over mulligan. So I think 3 Mishra's Baubles and the 17th land works much better. Alright, the removal. Well, I'm pretty removal heavy. I would say of the Temur Delver pilots right now, playing with DRC and playing Delirium decks, I'm going a tad far. Mostly because I want as many different card types as possible in my deck, just to increase percentages of getting Delirium online as early as possible, and also maintaining Delirium. So if your opponents inevitably bring in Graveyard Hate, maybe they exile your Graveyard or whatever, you want to be able to get back to Delirium as quickly as possible. So the more different card types you have in a deck, it just increases your chances, it increases your percentages of that. Which is why I'm playing 4 Lightning Bolt. I'm also playing 2 Tarfire, which is very common right now in these lists. And I'm also playing 2 Seal of Fire. Obviously, Seal of Fire is an enchantment. It has the same effect as Tarfire. Of course, it's not instant speed, but it is an enchantment, and you have no other real enchantments in the deck. So this is a nice way to boost your Delirium as well. And Unholy Heat, which is also a new printing in Modern Horizons 2. This card's pretty awesome. I mean, usually you would probably play Flame Slash in this slot, but now that you have Unholy Heat and it's also being played in a Delirium deck, well, dealing 6 to a creature or planeswalker is pretty darn good. Way better than Flame Slash, that's for sure. Early game, if you just need to get rid of a Birds of Paradise or whatever for 2 damage, is perfectly fine. It's okay to use Unholy Heat that way. You don't want to keep this in your hand for the one time you can deal 6 damage. Use it when you need to get rid of a creature. But if you draw it mid to late game and you take out a bigger creature or planeswalker, this is really, really great. So yeah, I think this removal lineup is pretty aggressive, but I think it's worth it. I'm playing 10 removal overall, and yeah, I haven't gone back. I think in the current meta, you want as much removal as possible. So there's the removal suite. All right, the permission. Well, 4 counterspell, 4 force of negation. Nothing fancy here. You definitely still want your force of negations. You definitely still want your counter spells. We just make it in terms of blue spell counts for force of negation to be, justifiable at 4 of. So yeah, I think this is a good package. It works well enough. I wouldn't necessarily change it. Still can't play Stubborn Denial in this list, but in other lists I'll be deck teching in next week and beyond. Stubborn Denial does make a reappearance, but for now, 8 permission spells is what you're going to get in this package. That's it. I mean, there's not much more to that. Now we're going to get to the lands. So the lands, not much has changed here. As I mentioned, the biggest change I've done is I've now gone, and I haven't changed my Temur Delver mana base in years. This is the first time I've really played around with it, and it hasn't been much of a change, but it's significant enough. Normally, I always played with 1 breeding pool, 2 steam vents, 1 stomping ground. That was always the configuration for shocks. You know me and my personal opinion on Botanical Sanctum, Spiral Canal, great cards, but those are not lands I necessarily want to play in my deck. So, I obviously was going to have to play around my shock count. Here I've added an extra breeding pool. That's really it. So I've added an extra breeding pool. I've cut down on 1 island. I usually ran 2. So now I have 1 island, 1 forest, 1 basic island, I should say, 1 basic forest. And I'm running 1 extra breeding pool. That's really it. The rest of the mana base is essentially the same. I'm mostly doing this because of Counterspell. So before Mana Leak was, a bit less intensive on blue requirements. Counterspell obviously is higher. And I just need access to green as well. Green is a relatively important color in this Temur Delirious Delver list, so this is why it made sense for me to increase my breeding pool count and not necessarily add an extra forest or an extra island, because that's not what you want. You want access to both colors, not 1. So that was the major change. Everything else pretty standard here. The sideboard still in flux for me, but I'm settling more to something that looks like this. 3 Veil of Summer as always, of course. Alpine Moon, again, it's the best I think you're gonna get if you're gonna be playing Counterspell. For me, if you have any card in the main, especially, but in general in the 75 that requires blue or green, Blood Moon starts to become suspect to me, because again, Blood Moon is a card you want to resolve ASAP. You want it to resolve turn 3, because you can't usually do it any faster in this deck. So turn 4 often is too late. And for me to wait an extra turn just so I can secure a second, blue source, like a second blue, which I don't even run. I only have run 1 island, so it wouldn't even be possible for me. Blood Moon just doesn't make sense. It's too restrictive based on the spells we want to cast here. So Alpine Moon it is. It's too bad because I really love Blood Moon. I'm a big Blood Moon advocate. But if you're playing Counterspell, I don't see how you can justify it. So Alpine Moon is going to do, you're going to bring it in against Urza Saga, Tron, Primetime decks, any deck where you need to target specific lands. This will be important. It's too bad. I used to bring in Blood Moon against Jund. Sometimes Blood Moon against Jund, you just shut them out. It's game over. I can't do that anymore, but it's fine. You have a relatively good matchup against Jund anyway. So Alpine Moon it is. Engineer Explosive, still pulling its weight. Love that card. Really, really important in a lot of games, a lot of matchups. You bring that card in. Destructive Revelry. So it's been a while since I played this in my lists. In my sideboards, I've usually played Return to Nature or Braid. I'm not sure where I'm going to land. I might switch back to a Braid, but I like the ability to hit enchantments as well. So for now, Destructive Revelry it is. I like the ability to also deal 2 damage to my opponent. 2 damage makes a big difference. Shadow Spear for some life gain and for bulking up some creatures if you're playing against larger creature decks. It's really the main reason why it's there. 2 Huntmaster to Fell. So I'm off cloth this for a while. I'm going to see how it goes. I really love my Huntmaster. You know me on Huntmaster. I love this card. I have a signed art front and back on my wall. I love Huntmaster to Fell, so I'm playing 2 of it in my sideboard. I'm perfectly fine with it, especially in this deck now with Surveil, filtering lands or non-lands, Abundant Harvest, being able to hit extra lands when you need them. Getting to 4 mana is really, really easy, so I've had no issues casting Huntmaster Defels, and again, it's a must-answer creature, like most of the creatures in your deck have to be. If your opponents don't answer it, you are going to start wreaking havoc, and you're going to close out the game really quickly. So, Huntmaster Defels in the sideboard, and 2 Grafdigger's Cages, because graveyards are still very much a thing in this meta, and I need a way to shut those down. So right now, Grafdigger's Cage is the best way to go. Alright, the matchups. So, at the end of the day, you're gonna, get some bonus points in some matchups and lose some points in others. I think the fact that you have 8 in the air creatures is really gonna help you out in a lot of your matchups. So let's start off, as usual, with combo. Spell-based combo. So, you do have a ton of removal. If you're playing against Storm, which is a lot of the type of non-spell-based combos you're gonna come up across, you're going to have a lot of removal for their creature mana, their creature spell accelerants. And that's really good because you don't want those accelerants on the battlefield. You want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Goblin Electromancer as an example. So having 10 removal, at least in game 1, is going to be good. And hopefully you draw into it. Force Negation and Counterspell are going to be your friends. Obviously, Veil of Summer probably in the side to make sure they don't get you with some counterspells in games 2 and game 3. I think overall, your general matchup against spell-based combo is the same as most other the Temur Delver decks I've listed here. The permission package that we usually run is almost always the same. I'm not running more than I'm not running Disrupting Shoal. I'm not running Stubborn Denial. That would be nice, but they don't work in this current list. But I think, generally speaking, you're not losing too much, and you still have a relatively good game. Against primetime decks, other types of combo decks, odd combo decks that might come up, you have the tools available to you, again, in the main, and especially in the side. So primetime decks, you're going to bring in Alpine Moon, you might bring in Destructive Revelry, take care of Amulet, if they're playing that variant of primetime. Whatever it may be, you have a lot of tools at your disposal that you can deal with these types of decks. So I think combo in general has always been a good matchup. I'm also bringing up now Cascade. Living End is making a slight comeback. We're going to see where that ends up. Anything playing with Shardless Agent, so just dealing with Cascade spells in general. Force Negation is going to help you out. Counterspell is going to help you out. You're going to have some game there. But we're going to see where all those Cascade decks land. It's still unclear where they're going to settle in the meta. Aggro decks. So your aggro matchup actually gets a lot better with Temur Delirious Delver than other builds. Again, a big reason for that is that a sixth of your deck is removal. So you're going to be drawing into removal quite a bit. And the ability to surveil with DRC, assuming DRC survives, is going to allow you to dig for more removal if necessary. You're going to be getting some pretty big goifs in this list. In this list. So get ready for some 5, 6, 6, 7, sometimes 7, 8 goifs. Those are some pretty big goifs that your opponents are going to have to deal with. Going to be trouble to deal with. Trust me. So you'll be able to attack in with your DRC and Delvers while your goifs stay back and stop any meaningful attacks, counterattacks from your opponents. So it's not to say that aggro decks can't get, up and from under you and take you out. That's very much possible. And let me tell you, the Merfolk decks that are coming out now, with all the upgrades that Merfolk has gotten, really is scaring me. I've played a few matchups against them. You got to get the removal in early, or it's going to be a brutal match. And if they got Aether Vial, it's going to be even worse. Merfolk is still something I'm trying to figure out. Let me just be honest with you there. But again, the amount of removal that you have is going to be important. You just hope they don't have the nuts. But right now, Merfolk is seeming very consistent. So we're going to see where that goes. And if they become a real nuisance, we might play other spells in the sideboard to help us out. But again, 10 removal main. You have Engineering Explosive, Destructive Revelry in the side. You have you can even play Veil of Summer if you're playing against a Merfolk variant that has counter spells. Some of them do. Just keep that in mind. You have a lot of tools at your disposal that you can deal with Merfolk, but they are scary, so don't be too confident. Big mana decks. So I think overall your matchup against big mana is more or less the same. Stubborn Denial would be nice, but you don't have it. Force of Negation is still there. Counterspell definitely helps you with big mana decks. Here I'm always talking about Tron, generally speaking. So against Tron decks, the fact that you have Counterspell now means you're always going to be able to counter their spells, even into the mid-late game, whereas Mana Leak would become kind of useless to you at some point. So this is really good. That's not necessarily a benefit of this particular list, but just Counterspell in general. You have Alpine Moon inside to deal with specific Tron lands, and Alpine Moon is very cheap, so you can get it out turn 1, turn off Tron more or less immediately, which is great, whereas Blood Moon you have to wait turn 3 to get it online. So I think your big mana matchups are relatively okay. I don't think you're going to be having too much issues, but again, sometimes big mana just has the nuts and you're screwed. But you have a lot of play now, so just go with that. Not Magic, Dredge. Dredge for me is still a black hole. I'm trying not to plan too much for it. I'm kind of putting my head in the sand and hoping that Dredge just doesn't become a thing. Obviously, if Dredge becomes a thing, it becomes tier 1 or whatever, we're going to have to adjust accordingly. Play a ton more of Graveyard Hate in the side, and we'll go from there. But Dredge becoming like a tier 1 thing might also make this deck less... what's the word I'm looking for? Less appealing. Because if Dredge becomes a tier 1 thing, then everyone's going to be packing a ton of Graveyard Hate. And you know what? You do fold a bit to the Graveyard Hate with this deck. So that's something we're going to have to revisit if Dredge or other Graveyard heavy decks become oppressive. We might have to come and revisit this list. But hey, Temur Delver has always been somewhat soft to Graveyard Hate, so it's not something new. I didn't go all in with this list. I definitely could have. I'll show you some other lists coming up that go a bit more all in on depending on the graveyard. Here you have a relatively good balance because you do still have Tarmogoyf. You do still have Delver of Secrets. So that's my thing on Magic. Control. Yeah, control really depends. It really depends on the type of control decks that are coming out now. I think if you're just playing like a standard blue-white control or even Jeskai control, you're relatively okay. It's going to be a rough matchup, but you have Veil of Summer, you have your own counter package, you're going to have to grind it out, and you usually end up on top, but it really depends. I mean, if they have all the answers when they need them, well, there you go. But I think you could hit them pretty hard, relatively speaking. Stoneblade decks... Again, there's so many Stoneblade variants now. Anything that's playing white is playing Stoneforge Mystic. So there's so hard to cover. And some of those Stoneblade decks are not even control necessarily. Or maybe they're like white-black control, I guess you could say. Or white-black taxes. But against Stoneblade decks, again, you have a ton of removals. So odds are you can ideally get rid of Stoneforge Mystic when it comes down turn 2. Which means they're not going to get their Batterskull or whatever turn 3. So that's a good thing. That's a positive. But a lot of those decks are now also playing Giver of Runes. So yeah, it's going to be one of those. Hopefully the stars align for you, and you can get rid of Stoneforge Mystic. In the side, you have things like Engineered Explosives to get rid of Germ Tokens, for example. You have Destructive Revelry or whatever artifact hate you have to get rid of any artifacts they bring in, except for Kaldra, which I believe is the name of that new artifact that they're playing, which is indestructible. Something you're going to have to keep in mind because it's something you're just going to have to hope you get rid of Stormforge Mystic and they try and hard cast it and then you counter it. That's really the only way you're going to get rid of it. So keep that in mind. But again, you could also bring in Engineer Explosives to get rid of whatever tokens are generated from it. But by that point, if you can't get rid of Cauldron, you've probably already lost the game. So it is what it is. So I think against Stoneblade decks, not much changes here. The fact that, like I said, you do have a lot of removal does help. Very, very good. But I think it's still more of a 50-50 split when it comes to this matchup. Mid-range decks. Jund. Still a thing. Now I'm seeing a lot of Golgari mid-range or just other types of like 2-color mid-range decks, which is, it's understandable because there's just a lot more powerful tools being printed. I'm seeing a lot of white-black X decks, white-black X mid-range decks because of Vindicate. So because of Vindicate is a thing now, you're seeing a lot of decks that are playing white instead of red or whatever, which is fine. At the end of the day, mid-range games are always going to be mid-range decks or matchups. Decks, matchups, whatever it is, you're always going to be grinding against those. Hopefully tempo is maintained in your favor. Sometimes it's going to swing back and forth. You're just going to have to grind it out, bring in the necessary protection from the sideboard. Huntmaster of Fells will be great here. Veil of Summer will also be great. Play accordingly. Just assume they're going to have Fatal Push or something and play around the removal as much as you can. It's pretty much the same game plan. Having a lot of removal is helpful to get rid of their smaller creatures or just go to their face. Play smart. Sorry, I don't have anything more specific there. If you have questions, let me know in the comment section. But I think mid-range decks are always going to be relatively okay matchups against a Temur Delver deck. And I think nothing really changes here. If anything, again, it's even better because you have a lot more firepower in the air, and that's just something that a lot of these mid-range decks don't have, even the ones splashing white. So I think that's definitely a bonus for Temur Delirious Delver. And that's it. That's my my initial DRC Delver list. I really had a lot of fun playing this deck. I'm not sure if this is my #1 currently favorite deck, but it's, in terms of Delver, I think it's pretty close. It's top 2. This is a pretty fun list. There's a lot of potential for this list, but there are so many variants to Temur Delver in Modern, especially now with all the new printings. A lot of people are on the Ragavan train. I'm still not for Temur Delver, at least anyway. But whatever. So there's variants there as well. I'm just really enjoying Temur Delirious Delver. I'm also going to be enjoying Temur Traverse Delver and a few other Delver lists, or Delver lists that will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going on an extended deck tech series here with no breaks in between, because just Modern Horizons 2 has printed so much for us. So yeah, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about Temur Delirious Delver. I believe 5 matches are coming up today, so a lot of matches. Usually there's 3. Last week there was a bonus. Today there's 2 bonuses. I want to show different matches as much as possible with all these new changes. So stay tuned for all 5 coming out today. The first one coming out about an hour or 2 after this deck tech. Yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Enjoy my content in general, please subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook. Share my content on social media. Watch my content start to finish like you're doing right now. All that stuff really helps me out a lot. It really goes a long way. I really do appreciate it. I mean it. These are not empty words. If you want to support this channel on Patreon, check out the link in the description of this video. Check out the Patreon rewards. On the Patreon page, there's a short 5-6 minute video that explains Patreon rewards. You will almost certainly get back what you put into Patreon, and once you become a member for over a year, based on the Patreon rewards that you're promised, which you will be getting, there's a good chance you'll be making more than what you put into Patreon. It's not a gimmick, it's not a joke. I mean, if you watch the 5-minute video, you'll see what I mean. I mean, the math checks out. It's something that I am promising to you. It's something I enjoy doing on this channel. I love doing giveaways. I love giving back to the community, and I definitely love giving back to my patrons who are supporting essentially my sealed product opening habit that I have on this channel. That's all they're doing. I'm opening up sealed product for content and then giving all those cards away. So this is what I am. Maybe I'm an idiot, but that's what I do. Thank you, and have a good one.